Local communities are usually faced with a problem of poor management and analysis of data that can inform better policymaking and service delivery of health, education, and infrastructure. Take the pandemic, for example. How much should the limited budget be divided for COVID testing and quarantine facilities when there are other needs for education, disaster management, and social welfare? Who and where are the families who should receive ayuda? The lack of data has made it difficult for LGUs to respond to the needs of the community. How then can we harness the power of data and coalitions to help local communities find the right solutions to their concerns? Introducing the Data-Driven Development in the Philippines project, or PH3D. The project is co-funded by the European Union and Action for Economic Reforms. The Philippines in 3D project engages local government and civil society organizations to be champions of human-centered data-driven development. The project envisions local communities that are empowered to make decisions backed by the use of technology and data. This data-driven approach involves first collecting data that is timely, disaggregated, realistic, and involves local actors to identify priorities. Second, ensuring data is accessible to all stakeholders, such as local government units, the academe, civil society organizations, and the public. Third, analyzing data, turn it into valuable information and evidence, and build the capacities of LGUs and CSOs in the process. Fourth, using the evidence produced as the basis for creating targeted policies and programs. Finally, through regular feedback, this process will lead to better prioritization, mobilization, and allocation of local resources for human development. Critical elements to this approach are the formation of strong partnerships and the use of technology. The Philippines in 3D is grouped into three components. The Development Data Lab converts data into actionable evidence and information. The Policy Development Lab links the evidence with the design and implementation of targeted policies. And the Data and Tech Alliance for Development builds consensus around the use of evidence-based and participatory decision-making through community partnerships. The Philippines in 3D is a two-year project that focuses on four sites: Pasig City and Metro Manila, the municipalities of Mercedes and Giwan in Eastern Samar, and the province of Sorsogon in Bicol, and covers three sectors: transparency through freedom of information for Pasig City, disaster risk reduction management and governance for Eastern Samar, and universal healthcare for Sorsogon. To achieve our goals, we collaborate with partners from the local government, led by dynamic local chief executives. We also work closely with partners from civil society and state universities, including Lingap para sa Kalusugan ng Sambayanan, the Right to Know Right Now Coalition, and Eastern Samar State University. With strong cooperation from partners and the public, we can promote responsive local governance in our four project sites. And we hope to inspire other communities to become champions of data-driven development and participatory governance. This is the Philippines in 3D. Visit our website and follow us on social media to learn more about the project.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the PH 3D Online Learning Series. The PH 3D Online Learning Series is organized by the Data-Driven Development in the Philippines Project, or PH 3D. PH 3D is a project of economic reforms and co-funded by the European Union. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to rename your Zoom account, your organization, if any, followed by your first and last name. And to avoid interruption during the program, please make sure to mute your mic. You may turn this on later on if you wish to ask a question. We also encourage you to keep your video. If at any time you have any questions or comments, you may type them up in the chat box. And for those joining us on Facebook, you may type them up in the comment section. We will take note of all your questions and comments and read them later in the program. This is the first session of the PH 3D Online Learning Series, Introduction to Data-Driven Development Experiences from the Ground. Today, we will be hearing stories from a local government unit, a civil society organization, and the academia. Stories that tell their journey of using data as a way to improve the lives of people. To open the pilot session of PH 3D OLS, I'd like to introduce the head of cooperation of the delegation of the European Union to the Philippines. He has a broad experience in a multitude of fields, from his assignment at the European Commission to his various functions at the EU, ranging from humanitarian aid, civil protection, balance and payment support, social, economic, and trade policy. There's a trade policy framework between the EU and Eastern and Southern Africa, where he was posted twice. He was also an Austrian diplomat, focusing on development policy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and worked in the private sector on setting up a national package recycling system. Immediately before coming to the Philippines, he was head of cooperation at the EU delegation to Fiji, covering 17 Pacific countries and territories. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Christoph Wagner.
Thank you, Era. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation. Let me first acknowledge the presence of Mayor Bernard Tai of Cauayan City, Isabela, Mr. Filomena Anna, Executive Director of Action for Economic Reforms, Mrs. Jessica Reyes Cantos, the President of AER, also Mrs. Janina Joy Chavez, Mrs. Vicky Kimbo, and all the representatives of LGU, civil society, academia here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy that I can open this first session, this first training under this project. It is I think we all agree it's a very important topic. It's a very challenging topic as well. Let me say I appreciate that the team of Action for Economic Reforms is organizing this event, and that the first training is focusing on data-driven governance. So, and it introduces this concept, and also that this is done in a more practical form with stories and narratives from the ground. So obviously you can fill up a whole master's or PhD program with these topics, but what is important is how to apply it. Let me just reflect on a few points first, and then I say a few words on our cooperation. More general points. From my experience in the various countries and regions, and also in Europe, obviously data-driven management is very challenging. It's extremely well, it is on top of the agenda of many governments, of the public administration. But why is it so challenging? I mean, data collection itself, and I've seen it in the Pacific, for example, is difficult. It's very costly, especially if you have to do it on a systemic level and not once, but regularly. So you have to put in place systems to collect data, which costs money, which requires resources. So you need to be sure that the data which you collect is really used, because otherwise you waste these resources. Secondly, data processing itself is also difficult, not only because of the technology you need for that, but also the capacities you need, the human resources. The third big challenge we have also is that's very seriously, taken very seriously in Europe, is data privacy. If you have data, you have to make sure that this data is also dealt with in the right manner and is not leaked and is not being transferred to other parts of the public sector or private sector, which could abuse it. So data privacy is crucial. Then I think that is also the focus of discussions today: the use of data, how to really make it sure that the data is used for decision-making processes. It's not just being put in some files and it lingers there, but it's really used actively. And therefore, in the end, really contributes to delivery of services on the ground. So this link between the data collection to the better services on the ground has to be clear and has to be really thought through and planned. And of course, on the other hand, data is also there to provide transparency and accountability. And so also this is important, how to present data in a way that it is the population can understand, that the voters are aware of what's happening and that they can therefore contribute also. So I think all these are big challenges, and I'm not an expert in this, probably you are, but I'm very welcoming that, I very much welcome that you are addressing it today and through this training and further on through this project. Let me just finalize by saying, from a European Union point of view, it's really crucial to connect civil society organizations like Action for Economic Reforms and LGUs, communities. In the end, it will provide for better governance and more resources, more capacities, which is so crucial also now after the Mandanos ruling, where more and more competences will be transferred to the LGUs. And I think I'm told, what I have read, many of them are not really ready yet. So it is important to look at this as a process, continuous strengthening of LGUs, so that in the end they can deliver also, and for the sake of the population, also particularly the most isolated communities and vulnerable groups. So that's all I wanted to say, and thanks again for inviting me, and all the best for the discussions, and I'm happy to start off this training today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. Of course, thank you for your support. We could not have done this without the support of the EU delegation in the Philippines. You're right. Data has to be collected and actively used in order for it to contribute to improving the lives of everybody. And thank you for recognizing the importance of that. And also, but while and then at the same time guarding the security, all of the data that's being used. You're right in pointing out that, you know, coming up very, very soon for a lot of local government units would be the Mandanos ruling, and we at AER is also preparing to come to and help local government units prepare for that. So thanks once again. Mr. Wagner of the European delegation to the Philippines. Our first speaker is a consistent awardee of the most outstanding mayor in the Philippines. He was recognized as an ambassador for peace, one of the science ambassadors, and among the recipients of the 10 outstanding young men of the Philippines. An active advocate of localizing the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, he will share with us the story of how Cauayan City became the first smarter city in the Philippines. Please join me in welcoming Honorable Bernard Faustino Lamadrid D, the Mayor of the City Government of Cauayan. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ira, and thank you for the invitation. First and foremost, allow me to tell everybody, stay safe. I hope everybody's safe. I hope everybody's feeling safe and healthy at the moment. Greetings from the city of Cauayan. A pleasant afternoon to all. Firstly, I would like to thank the Data-Driven Development in the Philippines, or PH3D, Mr. Christoph Wagner, the EU delegation to the Philippines, the overall project coordinator, Ms. Vicky Kimbo, other officers and members of PH3D. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share with you the best practices of Cauayan City on smart cities projects, the localization of the UNSDGs, and how the city embarked into data-driven governance. To my fellow presenters, Dr. Antonio Danz, my favorite scientist, Professor Erika Legara of AIM, who is also one of our partners in our data science initiatives. Dr. Laurence Go, to everyone joining us today, from the LGUs, academe, CSOs, ladies and gentlemen, isang mapagpala at ligtas na araw po sa ating lahat. I would like to start my discussion by introducing the city of Cauayan. I would like to share the screen. Attorney Reina will help me share the screen. Please allow me to start the discussion, or my discussion, by introducing the city of Cauayan. Cauayan City is located 365 kilometers north of Manila. We are the poorest city among the cities in the region in terms of income, and we are a highly agricultural city. This is where we take pride on how a small, poor, and agricultural city was able to evolve as the Philippines' first smarter city. Cauayan City was given the recognition as the Philippines' first smarter city by the Department of Science and Technology on March 25, 2015, in recognition of its excellence in the delivery of social services through digital governance. When the United Nations launched the new 17 Sustainable Development Goals, Cauayan City took the lead in localizing these goals, which we call labing pitong hamon sa bawat Cauayanyo, or 17 challenges for every citizen of Cauayan, where all plans and programs of the LGU are aligned for the achievement of these global goals, with the aim to evolve as a smarter and sustainable Cauayan City. With the COVID-19 pandemic, the localization of the UNSDGs has helped the city of Cauayan adapt to the challenges by making the people of Cauayan City resilient, innovative, smarter and sustainable, inclusive, nurturing and goal-driven, rising in the new normal. Since the launching of the UNSDGs in 2016, these have served as a blueprint of Cauayan City's plans, programs, and developmental projects. Part of our process in championing the implementation of these goals are the creation of infrastructures, which are SDG inspired. These include the SDG Park and the Cauayan City Sports Complex, the first and largest SDG inspired infrastructure in the Philippines. These infrastructures are a manifestation of the strong commitment of the local government to implement the UNSDGs. At this point, I will be sharing with you our projects in smart cities and the UNSDGs, but I would like to focus more on our initiatives on data-driven governance. We are now in this generation where data is the new oil. We believe that data-driven governance is helpful in order for the government to be more effective when it comes to planning and decision making as data help the LGU in its
At this point, I will be sharing with
identification
you our
of
projects, smart
priority
cities, and
projects
the
and
UNSDGs.
how
But I would
its
like to
resources
focus more
can
on
be
our
utilized
initiatives on
efficiently.
data-driven governance.
Please watch this video.
We are now in this generation where data is
Okay, at present, the city has embarked in ISO 37122, or the Certification for Smart and Sustainable Cities. We aim to be the first city in the Philippines purposely to help us better assess the impact of all the initiatives we have implemented in the last 5 years. It is with high hopes that the accomplishments of Cauayan City could serve as a blueprint for other cities who would also like to engage in the same project to create more smart and sustainable communities in the Philippines. Data analytics and data science are complicated concepts for a highly agricultural city like Cauayan City. But we have high confidence that through the help of different partners such as PH3D, AIM, and other collaborators, we can make a huge difference in using data. In closing, again, I'd like to thank all of you for giving us this opportunity, and I hope that we were able to inspire you with this humble experience of Cauayan City. That smart and sustainable cities are not only for big and metropolitan cities. If it can be done in a city which is poor in terms of income, small and highly agricultural city like Cauayan, then there's no reason for other cities not to do it. Again, thank you and wonderful day to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mayor D. That is really the one of the things that we would like to say, and thank you for saying that it's not just limited for big metropolitan cities, that any city can do it. And I love what you said about that data is the new oil. It's really very exciting, but more than that, I think now more than ever we're seeing the importance of data, most especially in during these times. And we hope to speak to you a little bit more about your journey, your, as you call it, the road to data science. So you can also share with us more details of your projects. As you know, we as 2 out of 4 of our project sites is dedicated to DRRM, and we'll certainly be able to learn from your own experience. So thank you once again, Mayor D.
Thank you.
Coming up, he is the chair of the Philippine Primary Care Studies and convener of Health Professionals Alliance Against COVID-19. He is Professor 12 at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, an academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology, a director of the Asia Pacific Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, an associate editor for the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology in New York. He is also the main author for Painless EBM and has published over 120 papers and co-authored over 40 books and publications. Today, he will share with us their journey of designing an electronic health record system and its secret recipe in effectively helping doctors face their everyday challenges. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Antonio Dance.
Thank you, Ira, and good afternoon, everyone. Na-intimidate ako sa presentation ni Mayor Bernard D. Very high-tech, no? Pero naisip ko rin sana ang pinasalita namin today, yung mayor ng municipality whose results we're presenting, no? Which is from Samal, Bataan. Former Mayor Jean de la Fuente, and the current mayor is Mayor Aida Macalinaw, who's done a lot in helping us come up with the data I'm going to present today. I'm wondering if you can see my slides, Ira?
Yep, we can see it, sir.
Okay, so the outline of my talk is about the philosophy behind the electronic health record of the Samal municipality in Bataan. And in keeping with our theme for today, I'm going to talk about how we pull the data and how we push for development using that system. Okay, so start with the philosophy. So I'll start with a story. I like to tell stories. This is a 70-year-old man, my patient, no, who had to face the health system recently because he had cough and diarrhea and fever. No? And he had the choice, no, to go straight to a hospital. He didn't know if he should go to a lung specialist kasi baka COVID, or a gastroenterologist. Cardiologist ba dahil matanda siya, or neurologist, no? Or should he go straight to a pharmacy, buy some medicine, or to a laboratory and have his RT-PCR, or go to a doctor, nurse, or midwife in the barangay? No? What he did, because we're in a hospital-centric, was go to the nearest hospital, who told him he needed an RT-PCR, and so he could not be admitted at that time. So he went to the nearest lab, and then to a physician working beside that lab, who said, well, you need to get the results. So he went back to the laboratory, and the next day got the results, went to a hospital beside that laboratory who said he doesn't need admission, and referred him to a midwife in the barangay, no? Who said, well, you need a lung specialist. So by the fourth day, he went there, who said he needed an x-ray, went to the x-ray, got it back, and the lung specialist said, here's the medication, and you can go home, you don't need admission. So by the time he got home, he was well. Okay. And that shows the complexity and problems of our healthcare systems. Kasi there are so many problems experienced by these patients. And one of them is our hospital-centric system. Kaya siya yung unang pinupuntahan, yan ang funded. It's specialty-based. I think we have more specialists in the cities than we have primary care providers. And it's uncoordinated, kanya-kanya, no? The UHT law is trying to change all that, trying because it's not yet implemented. Let's reorganize the healthcare system. So hindi na hospital-centric. PhilHealth will now pay for outpatient services. Naantay na nating matagal, wala pa. Pero sana dumating na. It's now not specialty-based because the law states, it will be primary care-based. Yan yung ating doctors, nurses, and midwives at the front lines. And it will no longer be uncoordinated. It will be networked. No? So yun yung tinatawag na healthcare provider network. Of course, we're not talking of a network of roads here. Kasi kung yun lang ang pag-usapan natin, hindi yan network. To really network all these facilities, we need an electronic network. And this is specifically provided for in Section 36, which mandates a health information system. This is from the UHC law. All health service providers shall each maintain a health information system. So that's the philosophy behind it. We started before the law was drafted, but we had the same philosophy on which the law was based. So how do we pull for data? There are 4 principles which I think summarize how we try to harness the data for this health system at the municipal level. Number 1 is to simplify it. No? Itong ayaw po nating mangyari sa ating information system. What happened to the US system as reported by Kaiser Health News? No? Death by 1,000 clicks. No? The health system, record system was so complex that on the average, an emergency room physician would have to press the enter key or the click button around 250 times. No? And managing the health system was harder than managing the patients themselves. Ito po yung itsura. Daming windows, buttons, etc. And that is what happens when managers at the top level develop the system and then ask the frontliners to use it. It becomes cluttered and unuseful from the frontliners and later decays into non-use. So we don't want that. The main thing to simplify the health system is start from the front lines. Anong kailangan ng doctor, nurse, midwife, at barangay worker? Because if they need it, then they will use it. So we said ito yung itsura ng chart. 4 lang po ang fields. Subjective, yan yung S. Ano bang nararamdaman nila? Objective, ano ba yung nakita mo nung in-examine mo? A, ano yung assessment mo? At P, ano yung plan mo dito sa diagnosis at treatment? No? So yun lang. And we tried to capture that into an electronic medical record system. And also, it needs to adapt to local needs. Ito mahirap. You cannot buy off the shelf. And here are some of the local problems, frontline problems we face. Congested RHU, matagal maghintay, kulang ang doktor, overworked yung nurses, midwives. No? So we had some electronic solutions. So we connected the barangay health station. Naglagay kami ng terminal sa barangay health station. And we allowed people to remotely queue from the barangays. They don't have to go right away to the RHU. And in fact, they can consult at the barangay because we developed a module where nurses and midwives can propose a diagnosis or treatment, which can later be verified by the rural health physician. And for the overworked healthcare workers, we said the electronic record should not be a burden to them. It should lighten their load, not make it worse. Problems in some of our remote areas, malayo sa RHU, sasakay ka ng bangka. This is in Bulusan, Sorsogon, no? So we used the EHR to develop a transport validation system. So we, in our experimental setting, PhilHealth, which provided our funds, paid for transportation that was health-related, prescribed by the healthcare workers. Also, there was a lot of unproven treatments, lalo na nung pandemic. Sabi namin, kung wala yan sa National Drug Formulary, we will not pay for it. So that was programmed there. Tapos we developed quality of care modules to monitor how patients with certain diseases were being managed. For poor training, and this is a continuing need every time, lalo na sa COVID, laging may bagong information, we built in a decision support system called UpToDate, which provides them with the latest guidelines on almost any disease. Going upstairs now, may governance problems then, like disease surveillance. So we said, well, pag hindi mo nilagay yung ICD, that consult will not be paid for. What is ICD? It's the International Classification of Diseases. So our users were required to use that, and we had a user-friendly interpretation system that looked for the right ICD code for them. Yung nade-delay ang payment ho sa mga maliliit na munisipyo at malalayong probinsya, hindi po nila kaya. Pag na-delay kayo ng isang buwan, sasabihin nila, hindi na namin kaya, alis na kami. So we built in the accounting module and used that for surveillance to prevent misuse, abuse, and fraud. And I'll show you that later. The third is interoperability, which simply means yung mga specialists, connect them to the primary care and to the lab and the pharmacy. And the last is linking. And this is really a challenge, establishing the Wi-Fi network to connect everyone. So I'm going to show you the experience of the Philippine primary care studies. This is the municipality of Samal, no? On the eastern coast of the Bataan Peninsula. They have 14 barangays. And we we connected all those 14 barangays kasi hindi po sila maabot ng cellular network, walang cable. So we asked the help of the governor who bought 14 towers. We put a long distance router and put them in place using guy wires. I didn't even know what a guy wire was before this project, but the governor, the mayors helped a lot in setting this up. Because without those linkages, if you have individual computers that are electronic, without the linkage, you may as well not set up electronic records kung kanya-kanyang computer din. The main reason you use electronic records is so that you'll be able to link patients to all segments of the health system. So the last part is how we pushed for development, and I'm excited to present this data. No? Ito yung utilization rates at the start of the study. When we launched the electronic record system and our primary care system, consults increased from 1,500 to 5,000 per month. This is 2019 to 2020. As you know, the pandemic came in around March, and look what happened. A 90% decline in consultation. But look at the resilience. No? Within 2-3 months after the start of the pandemic, there was a resurgence of consults. No? We still have problems with lockdowns and people getting sick. No? But we're no longer this low right after the lockdown. And how did that happen? Well, this is one reason. We were happy we put computers in the barangay health stations because look at what happened. People were consulting at the barangays, and that's like a five-fold increase in barangay consultations. No? We're still wondering how consulta will trickle to the barangay. You need to connect them because that's where primary care is. And telemedicine consults increased tenfold during that period. And that's how we were able to maintain it. Healthcare expenses increased by around 100%, nag-double. No? But look, out-of-pocket expenses went down from 300 to 150 a year. And as a result, out-pocket expenses were only 18% on the first year after launching. That's a huge achievement compared to the average, ano ba ngayon era? I think net healthcare expenditure, the average out-pocket is still more than 50%. If you look at patient satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 5, in terms of availability, perceived efficiency, competency, communication, handling, and recommendability, everything went up, no, with flying colors. And if you look at impact on policy, we're talking about data-driven policy. When we launched funding last August, look at in the first month, we found that ang funding lang namin mga 1 million a month. We were spending 160,000 pesos on vitamins, and because of the false news that vitamins will help you avoid COVID, no? And zinc. And so what we did was we fed this back to the primary care workers and said, look, you're prescribing too much vitamins. And, you know, I think we're going to stop paying for this for a while. And look what happened, no? From 160,000 within a month, 1,000, and down again to baseline use. So it didn't take us 3 years, you know, like the what happened with cataracts and the pneumonia and the dialysis claims. It just took us 1 month to note that something was being fostered by fake news. So to summarize, in the push for development, and this is just the few that I can present you in the 15 minutes I was given, utilization increased, pandemic resilience was demonstrated, spending capacity improved, out-of-pocket expenses went down, patient satisfaction soared, and we detected misuse from false news. But I'm sure using the same system, we can detect and prevent abuse and fraud. So I'm going back to end, Ira, to the story of this 70-year-old male. If he had gone to a system that was properly prepared, ito lang dapat gagawin niya. Go to the nearest primary care worker who would say, you need a test. I'm talking to the lab. You can go there and take it. Then go to the lab and buy your antipyretic for your fever and your hydrating solution for your diarrhea. And then you can go home and we'll call you if there are any problems. Now imagine if we could do that, not just municipal-wide, but province-wide and nationwide, then really patient care would improve. I'm going to end with this slide showing you an information system and a stethoscope. Personally, as a physician, and I've been practicing for most of my life, I would rather lose my stethoscope than lose my information system, information about my patients, and connectivity, which will tell me what's the best to do for them at the moment. Yes, because now electronic records are part of our weapons against disease. No? They are not just supplements. They're one of our main tools to improve the health of our people. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions later.
Thank you very much, Doc Dance. You know, it seems to me that the patient you described is pretty much all of us. I think all of us have, have gone through the kind of journey of having to go back and forth just to figure out at the end of the day that we don't need it. And it really goes to prove that it doesn't even have to be super high tech in order for it to be responsive to the needs of the people. I like what you said about pulling data in order to push for development. Catchy, but it's really true. And I think you've unlocked for us the secret recipe of your intervention, which is removing, I guess, uh, leading discussions and moving it to frontliners so that it becomes a system by frontliners for frontliners.
Exactly.
I love
Great.
how you've mentioned that it's you've also described how it's a data-led design. You looked into the journey of the healthcare workers and even of the patients, which really shows that it's very relevant to all of the stakeholders, not just the healthcare workers, but also the patients. Having seen the results of a survey, I think that was 4.8 out of 5. By also reducing their out-of-pocket expenses and being responsive to the situation. I love how you've mentioned how remote consultation actually increased consultation in a very impressive results, as it really shows the reality of life, and that maybe travel has an additional expense that it may become actually a deterrent to coming to have yourself consulted. But I guess very mindful also of the current COVID situation. Uh, I love how you also mentioned that there's a collaboration, that is not just one person doing everything, but there's a collab between the provincial government and the local government units in order to address a very necessary infrastructure, which is connectivity, and an issue that continues. And is just an issue everywhere in the Philippines. Using data again, of course, to also reduce expenses by being able to see real time what is happening on the ground, and therefore being able to issue or prescribe better respond. Surely the 15 minutes, you're right, wasn't enough, but we hope to talk to you a bit more later, as we look into the baseline data survey results with my colleague Laurence.
I'm interested to hear everyone else too, Ira. I'm excited to listen.
Yeah, thank you, Doc Dance. Remember, to all our participants, you may send us your questions or comments at any time via the Zoom chat box. And for those joining us on Facebook, in the comment section of the Facebook. Our next speaker will tell us how, through the power of big data and algorithms and a grand collaboration of two national government units, four local government units, an academic institution, and the private sector, has helped put together a simple yet much needed innovation in contact tracing, a combination of high tech and the all ubiquitous keypad phone to notify people via SMS or text message. She is the Aboitiz Professorial Chair in Data Science and the Academic Program Director of the Master of Science in Data Science at the Asian Institute of Management's Aboitiz School of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. She was recently awarded the Outstanding Young Scientist by the National Academy of Science and Technology, the highest recognition and scientific advisory body of the Philippines under the Department of Science and Technology. Her exceptional work in computational physics, complexity science, artificial intelligence, and data science has attracted prominent acclaim. She has over 25 peer-reviewed scientific publications in different fields under the umbrella of computational physics, data, and modeling and simulations. This is in addition to her more than 50 conference publications and scientific presentations. Just as important to her are contributions to Philippine education, designing and implementing the country's first ever data science program at AIM, in analytic that has been considered top 3 in analytics program by EdUniversal in the whole Far East Asia. She's also the lead of she also leads the analytics computing and complex systems laboratory at AIM as its deputy managing director, and she provides invaluable assistance in crafting the Philippine government's AI roadmap. In 2018, she was awarded one of the outstanding young men and women of the Philippines in the field of education and innovation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Erika Legara.
Hi, Ira. Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I enjoy the talks of Mayor Bernard, who's actually a Time awardee as well, Ira. No, we're batchmates.
Yes, yes.
Time, and I love the talk of Professor Tony. Um, it's really amazing, and it gives hope, no, on what the Philippines can actually do, especially if and when we become truly data driven. And hopefully, this presentation will inspire other LGUs and policymakers, to use data in your decision making processes. Ira, I just want to check with you if you're seeing the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to PH3D Coalition and also to AER and also the EU delegation to the Philippines for making this event possible and for inviting me to be part of today's learning session. All right, everyone, you have your chat box, right? I just want you to type here in your chat box. I have a question for you. My question is, what do you think are the pillars of a pandemic response? Ibig sabihin, paano natin isosolve yung pandemic? Ano yung mga kailangan natin gawin? Can you type in the chat box? Let's see.
Am I included here, Prof. Erika?
Yes, go ahead. Coordination, Patrick, contact trace, very good, good governance. We need data, sabi ni Joel, funding, follow protocols, detection, containment, treatment, that's really good, people's cooperation, everything that you're putting in the chat box, I'm looking to my left, very true, okay? And more generally, the pillars really are, and then everything else will fall in general. Test, trace, isolate, and vaccinate. And all the things like proper reporting, coordination would be part of each of these pillars. Okay, so why is it important that we test, trace, right? And then, of course, vaccinate, that's very clear. But for some, hindi importante sa kanila yung trace, no? Which is actually a mistake, a big mistake. So why do we have to trace? For example, you have this person here who has symptoms, who's contagious, right? We cannot do anything about it except to isolate that person. But if that person contacts with or interacts with other individuals, it doesn't have to be conversation. It could just be him passing by, or stay in the same room for 5-10 minutes. Then suddenly these three are potential. They could be asymptomatic, meaning they don't show symptoms, but they're already carrying the virus with them. The problem is that if we don't get to trace these individuals or track these individuals, they could further spread the disease. That's why tracing is one of the more important pillars in the pandemic response. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, it's also one of our weakest link. And that's not coming from me, that's coming from our policy makers, from our decision makers in government. You can see here that we don't really go beyond the household when we contact trace. Imagine, I'm sure since last year you've been to the malls, right? But have you once, at least once, have you received a text message from anyone that you were in a place where there was a COVID infected individual? No, diba? But I'm pretty sure you've signed many papers, no? And you would even put fake names because you're afraid of data privacy, right? Every time you get inside a bank or, in the malls, I'm afraid to put my cell phone number. So sometimes because of the privatization that they will not let me in. No, I would put fake numbers as well because it's really scary, no? But at the beginning, of course, we were all following the rules, but then parang it's not really it's not very effective, or parang and you would see the papers all over the floor, for example. That's really scary. Okay, so what is the ideal contact tracing ratio? Now, in other countries, if you have one person who is infected, the ideal ratio is that you should be able to at least contact at least 30 or around 30, not at least, an average of 30, okay? In the Philippines, however, this is from an August 24 data from the Philippine Medical Students Association. They're saying that the ratio is actually 1:6. that is super, super, super terrible, right? And this is the form that we're all familiar with. And how do we do traditional contact tracing? Literally, our healthcare workers and volunteers visit the houses, no? And it's very labor intensive. Hindi kaya, especially if you have what, 20,000 cases in a day, no? So it's obvious that if you want to scale this effort, this very important pillar, okay, in the pandemic response, we have to look into data, technology, and analytics. So we have to do away with the logbook, the pen and paper, right? Because sino ba talaga ang nagko-consolidate niyan? Meron ba? So that's one question that we also have to ask ourselves, right? So we have to look into technology. The good news is that the technology is not really that new. There's a lot of existing technologies out there, and we can use contact tracing apps, right? Parang obvious yung solution, but how come we're not very successful in this particular space? And what I'll show you later are the challenges that many LGUs face, and our work with some of the LGUs. And I can say that we have been successful, no? And Saya, kasama nga si Ira in the projects, na, and hopefully what I will show you will be inspiring. So these are just some, okay? A lot of cities are also using Stay Safe. I know that Cauayan City is also very active in their contact tracing now. But in this particular use case, I'm just going to present to you our work with these 4 LGUs. Okay, so the problem kasi, guys, is that I think Christoph mentioned this earlier, no? Collecting data alone is not enough. It could be very costly if walang output from the data. You will just store it. It can be very expensive, not only because you're paying for storage, but because you're also paying for security, because you want to protect the data privacy of individuals. So you have to make sure that there's something useful from that data. So when you talk about data science, it's really not just about data. Insight is the new currency. No? From the data, kailangan meron tayong insight that would help us in our decision-making process. So this project that was led by NEDA, but it's really a multi-stakeholder project. Ito lang yung goal namin. This is a very short in terms of duration, no? We want to be able to link the results from test centers and also contact tracing app databases. You will see mamaya na ito yung big problem. And I will talk a bit about it later. And of course, once we have that, at the end of the day, we want something actionable. We don't want a report lang, diba? So implement an automated text messaging strategy. So that is, these are the 2 goals that we have here. So anong problema? Many of our systems do not talk with each other. Alam na alam to ni Prof Tony, ni Doc Tony, no? There is the repository ng mga cases from DOH, and then meron tayong the logs from the contact tracing apps and the logbooks ng mga guard natin. But they don't talk, so we don't really know who the individuals in the logs are infected, right? So if we don't know who are infected, then who are we going to contact and reach out? Exactly. So that's why the team really worked with academics. So the LGUs together with the national government had to tap analytics experts, and that's from our team. So what's happening now is that AIM has a really powerful supercomputer, and we have the capabilities as well to crunch big data and to even write algorithms to build the contact network. Okay, so from these 2 data repositories that are independent, we integrate them. And then we process the information in this supercomputer, and then the supercomputer sends the output and the result to the LGU cloud service. So this is now owned by the LGU, and also to some SMS blast center. This is now in collaboration with the industry. Kasi we want to send text messages later, diba? Kasi we want something actionable. And then from here, the LGUs can opt to call the individuals who have been texted, no? Or the individuals can also call the LGU. Of course, we don't want individuals to panic, No? But we've run this and we have been very successful, as I will show you later the results. So after we call the individuals, we can recommend whether the individual should be on quarantine or take the COVID test or do nothing at all, right? So this is the whole framework that we have here. In the next slide, I'm just going to show you the important people behind this. Bakit? They haven't been sleeping. Ira knows this. So the four young kids here, calling kids, data scientists, they haven't been sleeping for months because there is urgency in here. Typically these projects would take more than 1 year, but we know the urgency. We have to be able to crunch data immediately. Actually, Gilbert is here. So this was the data science team, but I will show you later that it's really a collaboration among all or among different stakeholders. But I highlighted the data science because I want to highlight an important factor here, the ability to analyze data. We have to admit that not everyone can analyze data. This is why collaboration is very important. And we don't want LGUs to be daunted, no? Parang ay nakakatakot, bakit parang hindi naman yan kayang gawin, wala tayong capability, wala tayong computers. But there are agencies, industry and academia, like for example, Dr. Tony, Prof. Tony's team here, who are all willing to work with everyone. So from the log books, ito yung output you can see here. This is a beautiful, beautiful network, right? So you can see this is from location D, location A, location B, location E. Of course, these are all anonymized. And the information you're seeing in this plot here is actually aggregated data. So hindi na siya individual level. So aside from knowing who to contact, diba? Kasi you can contact now who are the potential contacts of the ones who were contagious, you can actually do a lot more with this kind of information. And one of the things that you can explore if you have this data is what if scenario. For example, how will we vaccinate individuals knowing that this is how we interact with each other? No, who should we prioritize? Should we prioritize the elderly, the young ones, or should we also prioritize the super spreaders? The super spreaders are the red ones here, meaning they are individuals who always interact with other people, like our bodyguards, no, our security guards, right? Yung mga nasa groceries, no, kasi they always interact with us. Sila ba dapat yung una nating i-vaccinate? We don't know, right? But this is the data, and we can play out what if scenarios. Lots of things that we can do. But okay, I'm nearing the end now of my presentation. Again, this is what I showed you earlier, but guess what the outcome is? In less than 2 months of data crunching, this is what the team achieved. Okay, it's really impressive, wow. Our data scientists. So now we can get a list of 160 names, okay, on average. Of course, it's different from city to city. But on top of that, we can even reduce it and ask who are the most vulnerable among these 116. And the companies, the LGUs can now contact them just to let them know that, hey, you went to this mall, merong contagious dyan sa mall na yan when you visited. Are you experiencing symptoms? Baka dapat magpa-test ka. Okay, so this is what data-driven science is. It doesn't have to be super high-tech, but the key thing here is actionable insight. Always aim for actionable insight. Implementing policies and strategies based on intuition alone, which is sanay na sanay tayo, no, can be very expensive, time-consuming, and sometimes catastrophic. Yung ka-cancel ka ng certain schemes, no, when it comes to quarantine, for example. We have to start using data-driven science. And then from there, we can justify yung mga decisions natin. Again, this work is really a multi-stakeholder collaboration. Don't feel na that's too high-tech for us. We don't have the capability. We don't have the equipment because the Philippines has a lot of talents. And we have companies like the Aboitiz, international organizations like ADB. We have PH3D, EU and AER actually to help us in our, to craft more data-driven policies. No? And finally, I just want to plug IRA, if that's okay. We are also working with governments. Kaya ako paborito ni Mayor D. Paborito ko rin si Mayor na Mayor. No, we are at AIM, we have a lab, and what I'm showing you are all data scientists, full-time data scientists. We're working with Cauayan right now and Baguio City on very smart city initiatives. And we are in talks with Iloilo, Calamba, and Legara. Hopefully, we get to work with you in one way or another. Thank you so much, Ira, and everyone.
Thank you very much, Prof. Erika. What a challenge to synthesize this. Having worked together with you, it's sort of challenge because I'm too close to the picture, perhaps. But uh, but then again, of course, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, contact tracing is weak, as the government has themselves has mentioned. And I think it's very important that you mentioned that it's pillars, it's plural. It's not just one that would solve COVID. It really has to be a combination of everything. And I think picking up from the word chord combination, collaboration has been such a common theme from Mayor D, Doc Vance to Prof. Erika. Not just of interventions, but systems, agencies, and thank you for also pointing out that you've also worked with Cauayan City in the past with Paturo, which is a GPS system for I guess origin destination using tricycles. But just as Mr. Wagner mentioned earlier, it's also very important to ensure data security in order to get people to trust the systems. And I hope that experience is seen across the 4 local government units that you've worked with. I do like what in the theme of collaboration and combining. Mayor D mentioned earlier that data is the new oil, and as Prof. Erika mentioned, while data is the new oil, insight is its currency. It might be very daunting to everybody, especially when you start seeing all of this. Illustrations or heat maps, but believe me, once you've started geeking out with these guys, you become a little bit more familiar, and before you know it, you'd be as immersed into the in, into the data sets and the illustrations as much as they are. And we're interested to see later on, Prof. Erika, maybe you can tell us about it. We have what does data say nga ba in terms of who should be vaccinated first? Maybe we can come back to that later on. And I love what you said about the new DDS, which is data-driven science. So thank you again, Prof. Erika. Again, to everybody, if you have any questions, you may already send it to us in the comment box of Zoom at any time. Or for those joining us on Facebook, you may put that in the comment section. Now I'd like to introduce a colleague at PH3D who will present to us the results of the baseline survey conducted across various partner local government units. And after his presentation, please stay of course, together with all of the speakers, we will join him in a discussion. He is a fellow of Action for Economic Reforms, a very good fellow, if I may say so, and currently the coordinator of AER's Data-Driven Development Program. He previously worked on data solutions for COVID-19 Action Network and AER's Food and Agriculture Policy and Fiscal Policy programs. He also worked with Resolve to study COVID-19 procurement processes in the Philippines. He obtained his doctorate in economics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and is currently a postdoctoral researcher in Barcelona. Laurence, perhaps you can help me pronounce the name of your school later on. Please join me in welcoming the lead of the Development Data Lab of both PH3D and Colab Dev, Dr. Laurence Kuo. Hi, Laurence.
Hi, Ira. Thank you for that introduction. Okay, so so for now, I think I'd like to compliment the speakers that we've had so far for this afternoon and present some of the results from our baseline survey. So just to give a brief project background for everyone who's not as familiar with what we're doing, basically, as you know, this year, the World Bank said that the data revolution is transforming the world. I think this is simply just echoing what our speakers have mentioned. And especially with COVID-19, we've seen how much and how important data is in policy making, in development, in our lives. And I personally believe in the statement that data poverty makes it hard to solve real poverty. So if we don't have enough data or the tools, as Doc Dance mentioned, if we don't have the tools to combat our problems and issues, then we won't be able to solve the development problems that we have. And here at PH3D, what we're trying to do is to harness the power of data for participatory governance. And we sort of took a step back and tried to think, what do we know? Ano ba talaga yung alam natin about the state of data in the Philippines in general, but more specifically with the local government units. And unfortunately, we actually, when we asked this question, we didn't know where to find such information or such data about this, getting a better understanding of how data practices are in the Philippines, what is the state of data in the Philippines. And so what we did was to embark on an online survey, basically asking about data availability, practices, capacity, policies, and partnerships among different LGUs, SUCs, and civil society organizations, with a total of around 230 respondents. So we piloted this survey in March, and then finally launched it from April to May. And we asked our partners from different projects at AER to respond to the survey. And basically, these are our survey sites. So we have 14 sites around the Philippines. We have a city in NCR. We have different municipalities and the city in municipalities in Sorsogon. We also have several cities and municipalities in Eastern Samar and Leyte, and finally in Misamis Oriental and Sultan Kudarat. But just to highlight, for PH3D, our main partners are the city of Pasig, the province of Sorsogon, and the municipalities of Arteche and Giwan in Eastern Samar. And the reason we chose these sites is that we have a good variation in terms of the size, in terms of population, in terms of poverty rates, income classes, and the different sectoral focuses for our projects. And just to dive right in, basically, I'd like to discuss now the baseline survey results that we got from this survey. And quickly, an outline, I'd like to discuss 5 main results. But first, motivating it in terms of what the LGUs perceive in terms of capacity, and then ending it with their perceptions on the importance of data in local governance. So the first, the first question that we asked the LGUs was to evaluate their own capacity in terms of 3 things. So the first thing is in terms of data collection, in terms of data management, and lastly, in terms of data analytics. And so using the blue bars to represent strongly agree and agree responses, we see that in general, LGUs are confident about their capacities, whether it be in data collection, data management, or data analysis. And so I think in the following set of results that I'll be showing, I'll be able to show everyone whether these perceptions actually align or are consistent with the prevailing practices of the LGUs. And I think it's important to really do or to have this check, because then we understand whether there is a gap between perceptions and the actual practices in our LGUs. Okay. So moving on to the first result on data collection and storage, basically what we see is that a lot of data is still collected in using paper-based methods. And so you can see that most of these different data sets that are available in the LGUs, for example, agricultural data sets, business-related, the community-based monitoring system, PSA surveys, etc., demographic data, are still largely paper-based. So these are the red bars that you can see. So despite the tech revolution that we're currently under or living in, what we see is that paper-based data is still predominant in the LGUs that we surveyed. And although what happens next is that we also see that data is actually also encoded into digital formats. But of course, we know that this would take time and resources in terms of human resources as well. The next related result is that data sets tend to be collected annually, which to us means that it is unlikely to be policy responsive. And what we mean by this is that especially in times of COVID, if we collect data that is only monthly, for example, then we won't be able to respond according to new information, according to things that are happening rapidly and on a daily basis. And so basically, because things are dynamic and ever-changing, we also want our data collection to somehow reflect this dynamism and this speed, right? And so we see that in terms of data sets, different data sets in the LGU, a lot of them are still collected very infrequently. And lastly, for this part, what we've seen was that when trying to understand how LGUs store and access their data internally, what we see is that data that LGUs tend not to have centralized data storages. So basically 96% of them say that they don't have a centralized data storage, neither do they have a data center or a computer lab that has the infrastructure to do this. In terms of inter-office access, only half of our respondents did mention that one department can access another department's data, right? And so this is what we call a different type of DDS, which is decentralized data systems, or what we call KKD, kanya-kanyang data. So what we see is that practices in the LGU tend to be very office-centric, which basically means that you have access to your own data, but not access to other departments or other offices' data. Moving on to the next result. So we looked at, apart from access to the data from the internal point of view, we also asked them about accessibility of the public and other stakeholders to whatever data the LGU has. What we've seen is that generally, LGUs claim that the data sets are accessible to the public. So you can see that a big percentage of respondents mentions high accessibility of these data sets. However, upon asking them how this data can be accessed, most of them mentioned, 75% mentioned, that it's only available upon request. And that request requires sending a letter, a physical hard copy letter to the LGU. And so in this case, although in theory, the data is accessible, in practice, it doesn't seem to be the case. The third result that we wanted to look into is how do LGUs use the data? Because I think Dr. Erika also mentioned that data that is collected is costly if it's not used, if it's just stored, right? And so we asked our LGU respondents, and they did say that a big majority of them said, 72% said that They frequently or always use data for policy. But upon prodding further, what we found was that data was actually primarily used, or 85% of our respondents mentioned that data was primarily used for record keeping and archiving. And 80% of our respondents also mentioned that it's mostly for compliance. So submission to the national government, with a much lower proportion of respondents mentioning that they do like basic statistics or graphs or predictive analytics using the data. And so what this reveals is that I think data usage is really mostly for compliance, mostly for record keeping. And so we haven't really unlocked and harnessed the power of data in this case. The fourth result is regarding what types of data-related policies would LGUs have. And so we asked them about the data privacy law and the Freedom of Information EO. Although there is high familiarity with these two things, only 15% of respondents did mention that they received any form of data privacy training. This is in addition to 29% of respondents saying that they have an actual policy on freedom of information. Apart from this, we also asked them whether they had specific policies or ordinances or executive orders with regard to the following: with regard to data collection, storage, security, quality, and sharing. And as we can see here, most of them actually do not. And so I think there is a lack of institutionalization of data-related policies in the LGUs, in our partner LGUs. And I think finally, just to talk about more the human side of data, looking at partnerships. And so what we asked here was whether LGUs had partnerships with CSOs or civil society organizations, and state universities and colleges are the academe. And 68% of our LGUs mentioned that they had partnerships, existing partnerships with CSOs, while 80% of them mentioned that they have partnerships with ICCs, which is a very, very encouraging result, right? Because they take advantage of these different partnerships. But then we also asked the question, are CSOs involved in the LGU's policy-making process, right? And according to LGUs, they say around 80% of them are always or frequently involved in LGU policy-making processes. Although from the perspective of the CSOs themselves, they think that only 60% of them think that this is the case. And so we have a difference in terms of perceptions. And I think that is an interesting thing to document as well. The same thing, the same observation can be made for SUC's involvement in LGU's policymaking processes. So LGUs perceive a higher instance of SUC's involvement, but SUCs themselves think that they're not as involved as they are in the policymaking processes of the LGUs. So I think this divergence in their perceptions is something that can be further clarified. And so just to conclude, I think what we wanna end with is the LGU's perceptions on the importance of data in their governance, in local governance. And so what we did was to ask if the LGU has a budget, or if LGUs have a budget appropriation specifically for data. And we see that only 22% of our respondents mentioned that they do. And I think, I don't know, despite this or because of this, LGUs realize the need to invest in data personnel or to invest in tech infrastructure. So we see a big percentage, almost all respondents say that it is important to invest in both data personnel and tech infrastructure. And I guess I'd like to end with a more positive and encouraging results in that it's nice to see that LGUs in general believe that they can benefit from external assistance and that data is actually valuable in government decisions and policy making. So yes, I think it's such an encouraging result for all of us here who are working with our local governments, the CSOs and the academe to try to encourage this more data-driven culture in the Philippines. And so I think that's it for me. Back to you, Ira.
Thanks, Laurence. I guess what the last slide says is that we're in good company. All of the local government units that we work with really understand the importance of data in governance. We have a lot of reference here. We have a lot of references here on, I guess, the value of data. Mayor D, of course, started out by saying that data is the new oil. Prof. Erika picked up on that and said data is and its currency is insight. And then I think and then Laurence picked up on that and said that data poverty, I guess relating it also to how to address real poverty. Laurence, I have a question. You started out by saying that we are in the midst of a data revolution. Did COVID have anything to do with accelerating, I guess, this interest in data?
Yeah, I think so. I think it highlighted the need for more data-driven policy making, the need for data that is more responsive from a time perspective, but also from an individual level perspective. And I think this pandemic, not just in the Philippines, but I guess around the world, highlighted the need for knowing, because I think the pandemic presented us with a lot of unknowns, and I think it's just human nature for to try to understand them. And I think data is the best tool to be able to understand the things that we do not know. Right. And so yes, I agree.
I guess pretty much the COVID just accelerated this process. So what do you think are the immediate effects of that? And I mean, did it also have an effect in terms of the frequency by which data is collected and the quality of data that is collected?
Yeah, I think so. If based on our results, I think of all the types of data, I think health data, and I think this is also partly driven by COVID or largely driven by COVID, is the data that's mostly collected at a smaller interval, right? And so I think this is driven by COVID, and I hope that this practice also sort of like spills over, not just for health data, but other data, other types of data as well.
Right. Thanks, Joel. Thanks. Sorry, not Joel. Sorry, just Joel was messaging me. Thanks, Laurence. But at this point, I'd like to invite back the rest of the speakers so we can have and we'd like to engage them in a conversation about how they feel about all of the results that Laurence has presented before us today. So we'd like to invite back Mayor D, Doc Dance, and Prof. Erika. Hello. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for staying and joining us again. Can I direct the first question to Doc Dance? Laurence started mentioning that, yes, it's true that we are indeed in the midst of a data revolution, and that it has accelerated the collection for data. And then he said that this is most likely data that's health related. What do you see from where you are? Is that true? And
well, yeah, I don't.
Same from what?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, and maybe I'm speaking out of frustration. It highlights a need that has been recognized for so long, and it's so painful to watch our people suffer because of our inability to use data. I think if I were to summarize the lecture of Erika, Ira, the summary is we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have the people. What we don't have is the political will to get our act together. And to me, that's the most frustrating. And the need is recognized and has been pointed out over and over since the pandemic started. We need to centralize our contact tracing. We need to centralize our health data. But ano we are like, I mean, dapat si Mayor D ang mag-lead nito. Kasi para tayong orchestra na walang konduktor. Yan ang nangyayari sa atin. We are acting, here and there, playing our own music. We need to become a band and play in harmony. And the obstacle is not technology, it's not human resource, it's not knowledge. All the wonderful people here with all the knowledge are willing to work even for free. Our main problem is political will. I'm sorry if I'm being so negative, but if you go down, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. That's our problem.
Doc Dance, thank you for mentioning political will actually. And Prof. Erika, you pulled off something that seems to be a feat, by the way that Doc Dance is describing it. How were you able to orchestrate not just all these local government units, but also a national government, two national government agency? And who's orchestrating and what music are you playing?
That's a very good question. This is what I tell usually, Aaron, lalo na sa mga data strategy classes, yung champion. Like what Prof. Das, you're saying, we need that conductor. Now, sa case ng project na to, I have to say, and I have to really hats off to NEDA Secretary Carl Chua. Grabe, he was really very hands-on. I think that's very important. Imagine, Ira, you have the academics, ang dami namin. You have the LGUs, ang dami ring bureaucracy dyan. And then you have the different departments, the DOH, the DILG, the DICT. And we finished, we gave results, at least in the whole team na yan, multi-stakeholder, in a matter of months. Something na sa tingin mo minsan hindi pwedeng mangyari sa Philippines. But yun one of the things that I learned from Gilbert actually, kasi he's much more closer working with the government, is yung management skills. No? Management skills of our government officials, which I believe, kasi I've worked with Mayor D, not to flatter him, but we only really have a few leaders who think like managers ng parang corporate, You meron kang strategic objectives, you have strategic imperatives, and then you really outline how we're gonna reach this, no? So I think we were really very lucky, and initially talaga most of our data scientists were, this Ira, diba? They were all working for free, no? Like what Prof. Dan said here. Ang daming willing to really give their talents because this is about survival. And we had a really good champion. Yun yung important doon, Ira, and I think that was really key, Sec Carl was always checking, like, ano nang update. You cannot just give, Sec Carl, next week may result. No, when you say next week, kailan? Monday, anong oras? No? So it's really parang corporate world. And that's why I believe it has been really successful. Almost unimaginable if you have that size of a project with different people.
Right. So in short, pressure. Magaling pressure.
Pressure. And a champion now willing to get his hands dirty.
Right. Yeah. Prof. Erika, I'll come back to what you said about a champion, but there's a question here on Zoom. More like it's a question for you on Zoom by Mr. Brian Sibilia. It says, "Hi, Prof. Erika. Is there a way private citizens can contribute to the project?"
Oh, definitely. You just we will connect you to the people who's really managing from NEDA. No, I'm not so sure if they moved it na yung nagmamanage the whole project, although it's multi-stakeholder, it's really from NEDA. We can connect you to them. And I'm pretty sure, this is really multifaceted. Definitely may way for private individuals and even institutions to work with a team.
Right. So thanks, Prof. Erika. Brian, what you can do is you can send us your contact details, and we'll pass them on to Prof. Erika, who can in turn pass it on to the team that's now running this project. Picking up from where you left off, Prof. Erika, we need a champion. And I'd like to ask Mayor D, how did you champion, data in, I guess, innovations also in your own city? Can you tell us about how the culture was at, the Cauayan City Hall before today, and how did you get them to be where they are today in terms of how they see data?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ira. And on a quick note lang before I answer that, I just like to inform everyone na si NEDA Secretary Carl Chu is also our batchmate sa TOIM. Kaya same wavelength sila ni Prof.
Yeah, the three of us.
Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, I probably wouldn't see myself as a champion, but more of just really, I'm being passionate about technology. Ever since we started, when I was talking about smart cities way back 6 years ago, people were like, ano ba yung smart city? Basta meron kang CCTV, smart city na. It's not about that. So it was a really concept of trying to make people understand the concept and notion of a smart city framework. There was even suggestions why we call it smart city, kasi Globe yung isa kong sponsor. Hindi lang pwede intelligent city or global or whatever. Like, it's a concept. It's a concept. It's a global concept. But and it's a continuous challenge. Ironically, we have, LGUs have so much data available, from DOH, DA, from CSWD, but they all work in silos. They're all restricted. They like what Erika said earlier. They don't talk to each other. They're all snobbish, diba? So one of the things that we try to really make everybody understand, and not just me talking, but it's very important to engage every citizen and every people responsible. For example, the department should know that the data they are doing would also help the other people. Because sometimes there's double data. People are getting the same exact data in different departments, as shown by Professor Dan kanina, yung experience nung matanda. Diba? I mean, that can only be done in one step if we have this collaboration. I think the key here is really a collaborative government. That's what we've been espousing in the city of Cauayan ever since the beginning, to have a collaborative government, not just with the private sector, but also the academe. The talent is there, the resources is there. It's just a matter of gelling everybody and making sure you're on the same page, making sure that you have a journey that all of you will go through. And it's not done overnight. Up to this very point, people are still trying to know where they fit in that smart, sustainable framework. But as you go along the way, you have to be persistent. You have to make sure that every now and then you all make sure that you're on the same page, you're on the same track, you're on the right track, and you have the same vision. I think at the end of the day, it's a constant challenge. It's just up to us to really make sure that we know where we're going. So yeah, that's our experience in Cauayan.
It's really so it's really the want to do it, and then just engaging everybody in order to get to where you want to be. Mayor D, we have a question. We have a live question for you from one of our participants. I'd like to call on Miss Jessica. Has a question for Mayor D. Hello, Miss Jessica.
Mute si Jessica.
Yep, you're on mute, ma'am. Ayan.
Ira, not used to be called Jessica by you.
Hello, Miss Jack.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mayor, and actually big thanks to Dr. Dance and Erika for being with us. Of course, Laurence has been quite. But my quick question with Mayor T is resources. How much investment have you done in your LGU with regard to putting all these things together? I mean, it's not like, hey, you guys talk to each other and really. And do you have a local statistician? Do you have that kind of an investment, human resource investment in your LGU? I mean, it's a lot of mayors are looking forward to the Mandanas thing because they'll have more money. But you know, it's not like it's a one-time big time for next year. Year after that, you don't have that much resources anymore. But how were you able to set it up in the first place? And do you have it the permanency, the sustainability is what I'm looking for. So, Mayor?
Thank you very much, po, Ma'am Jessica. Yeah, that's true. When people think of smart city, baka akala nila very expensive. And that's why I always stress that Cauayan City is a third-class city. It's highly agricultural. We're the poorest in terms of resources, but we were able to do it. How? How did we do it? Well, ever since we've been positioning Cauayan, whenever I talk to solutions provider, whether it be big companies, whether local or national or multinational companies, I always tell them, if you have sustainable solutions, smart solutions, use Cauayan City as your city lab. It's a test case. So I've presented Cauayan as a city lab, as a big city lab for all these solutions providers. So that's number one. Next is engaging or collaborating with the academe. I have a strong partnership with Isabela State University, and that's where all our resources come from, talent. And it's for free. I don't have to spend anything, and they would be glad, they're glad to help us out because a lot of them, in the academe, syempre, yung mga research works, di ba? That's the main thing, and if you're working at the academe, so if they're able to participate in any engagement with the city, then it's pride for the state university. So we've been lucky with that. And how did we institutionalize this? Ever since 2015, when we launched the Smart Cities program, we've already included it in our committee. So we have a committee now on smart sustainable cities. We are now engaging on projects and programs. Now pa lang kami naglalagay ng budget sa smart sustainable city. So whatever PPAs, whatever MOEs, meron ng item dun sa ano namin smart sustainable city. And it's a matter of just aligning. There are a lot of projects and programs under DA, under CSWD that are also smart sustainable. So pwede mo lang i-align yon. But what's important is that there's an aspect that any sustainable solution that come your way, meron kang paglalagyan or pagkukuhaan ng budget. So it doesn't have to be expensive, or it doesn't have to be a mere lump sum na big amount dun sa budget na yon, but it just has to have yung pagkukunan. And for all the LGUs listening now, everybody's excited for the Mandanas ruling, but us in the city that in fact the League of Cities are opposing the full devolution because it's a misconception that after 2022, when the Mandanas ruling is implemented, that LGUs will be a lot richer, a lot more liquid. No, it's not the case. With the full devolution, there's really more responsibilities, more things that the LGUs need to provide, and it's highly impossible. Taking out public works, taking out classrooms, for example, from the national government. Cities, especially municipalities, small municipalities will really have a hard time. So it has to be a gradual implementation of the full devolution. So it's a misconception that Mandana's ruling will make it more make the LGUs or cities or municipalities more liquid. It's not going to be the case. There's going to be more problems. There's going to be more responsibilities, more deliverables that will be expected from the LGU. So I think gradually, slowly but surely, it will be a transition period. It's not going to be overnight. 2022 will not be an overnight, like one time, big time, I hit the lotto. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be in the next couple of years, at minimum 3 years, 3 to 5 years, that there's going to be a transition on how governments would spend and would use this additional income.
Thank you, Mayor D. As you said, Mayor, 2022 is not going to happen overnight. And we definitely recognize that. Sana lang hindi nightmare. Sana lang hindi nightmare. We you know, Laurence presented earlier, in the survey that a lot of data is being, or the LGUs has mentioned that they're actually using data, but when they dug deeper, apparently the largest use of these data is not so much as an internal use for the data, or use in their day-to-day work, but more of in compliance to national government requirements. What for Mayor D, what is it like in your unit? How bogged down are you by these things? And to Doc Tony, what is the experience like for the local governments that you've worked with?
Si Doc Tony muna. Just
Sige, catch your breath, Mayor D. We'll unmute you, Doc Dance.
Yes, thanks, Hira. I'm very proud of our relationship with the municipality of Samal. The mayors have been very supportive and very appreciative, I think. They recognize what we're trying to do, develop a model electronic record system that, at least the principles of it can be used by other LGUs. And they realize the use of it in development, because we feedback everything to them. They know the out-of-pocket expenses and recognize that it is a very important parameter for the success of a healthcare system. So they note the overuse is detected early, and we can do something about it quickly. And because of it, they find it useful. One use pala that others might think about, na a secondary gain. When we develop a health information system, we automatically develop our database of healthcare workers. And up to now, we don't know the workforce density. We don't know how many doctors there are, how many nurses, midwives, what's the density, saan kulang, saan sobra. And when you develop a health information system, then you give them IDs and logins and passwords, and they need that to be able, for their patients to be able to gain benefits, then you're automatically building a workforce information system which they can use. And because they recognize the gains of it, they've been very cooperative in getting the network set up, helping us buy the computers, being cooperative in software development, and reaching compromises. Kasi kung minsan, I don't know, experience ni Mayor D rito, pagka ang data natin driven by people in armchairs, the data tends to be clunky. Alam mo, we found out, Mayor, na yung FHSIS information, each barangay collects 5 kilograms of data. Hindi na namin mineasure as pages, ang dami eh. 5 kilograms of data every month. And they send that. So, ilan ba sila? 15 barangay. Send that to the RHU. So, kasi bigat na ng isang tao yon. And then you process it and send it to the provincial. And provincial sends it to national. So, it's so clunky, it is no longer useful. And so, kung ganyan ang ating data, we find out abuse or misuse or even fraud 3 years later. And the parang too late na to sound the alarm. So they've been very cognizant of that. And so there are many administrative obstacles that they've helped us surmount. Yeah. So there's a political will in within that municipality. What we need to do is try to generate that political will at the provincial level. My opinion is hindi pa eh. Darating na yung ating tawag nito consulta funds.
Consulta funds.
Nasa provincial level, how will it trickle down, di ba? Kasi the real front lines are the municipalities and the barangays. So we need to stimulate that political will at the level of the province and at the national.
Right. Thanks, Doc Dance. Mayor D?
Okay, can you repeat your question for me?
You know, in terms of like collecting data, I also got so immersed in the emotions. I really felt the emotions of Doc Dance's.
I'm sorry,
but it's we can really feel that anyway. That what it's like to be to really be on the ground and in the forefront of collecting all of these pieces of information and having to find a way to make them work. No, Mayor D, I have a few questions for you here, in our group, and at this point, what I'll do is I'll post the questions that are being raised by the audience, and since we have very little time left, I hope you can answer the questions briefly. I also like to, unfortunately, Prof. Erika also had to leave. But if anyone else has questions for Prof. Erika, please continue to post them in our chat box, and we will definitely hand them over to Prof. Erika. Mayor, there's a question here from Patrick. What are the signs from the viewpoint of the government and program implementers that their intuitions could be wrong? Are there ways to spot these mistakes and recalibrate? So when you implement these things, what's your barometer?
Well, the sign is very clear. The pulse of the people. If they need that kind of solution that you're giving, then they'll use it. If they don't need it, then they won't use it. I think that's very, that's one of the things that learning experience from Cauayan is that, there's so many solutions out there. There's so many solutions providers out there. But what is it exactly that the people need and will use? That's a different ball game. So it doesn't have to be a grand solution, but something simple that is highly impactable and definitely will have a great use for the people. I think you engage.
Right. I think Doc Dance also said as much in his presentation that if they don't need it, they won't use it. So I guess that's just really across the board. We also have a question here from Joel. What is your sense of the implementation of the universal healthcare, particularly in relation to electronic records? I guess this is for Doc Dance. Are we on track? Really, really quickly. Yes or no? Are we on track?
No.
No.
There's so much to do, Ira. And then in fairness, it's not easy to do. There so much reorientation needs to happen. No? For example, we need to reorient ourselves and recognize that PhilHealth should not be talking of reimbursing healthcare. They should be talking about advancing it. It's a global fund. So it's insurance money, meaning when someone doesn't need it this year, that's fine because it will help someone else. And next year, baka sila yung tutulungan, no? Eh hindi pa ganun ang isip natin. Ang isip natin, the LGUs will spend it and then we will reimburse them for what they spend. So it's a reimbursement fund. It's not an insurance fund. And that has a lot of problems. Like for me, the most important problem is trickle down because provincial level is not trickle down. And that will entail a lot of political will. We need to connect to our municipalities and our barangays because that's where the action happens. Pumunta ka sa ano, I mean, alam to ng lahat ng mayor. Pumunta ka sa provincial, siksikan, nagagalit sila, pinapasa lahat ng munisipyo. Pumunta ka sa munisipyo, siksikan, parang simbahan, pinapasa sa kanila lahat ng probinsya, ayaw tanggapin. Pumunta ka sa barangay, kukonti ang tao. Merong dalawa, tapos nagche-chess, hindi healthcare. But in fact, that's the front lines. That's where people should go. We should empower our BHWs, our nurses, and our midwives there. Kaya yung nilagay ko ron, yung decision support system, knowledge support, so that people's respect for them will gain and their trust for the front lines will increase. It's a difficult task and wala pa sa plans natin yun eh. Nandun pa lang tayo sa very general, how much money to give the provinces per capita, how do we register people, andun pa lang tayo eh. So yes, there's so much work to do. I'm not blaming anyone for this. This is a difficult task. This is a task that we all need to join hands and get our acts together, including the healthcare sector.
Wanting to know where we want to go, collaborating to get to that destination. Doc Dan, Mayor D. Oh, sorry.
Can I add to the UHC? Ano pa yan? One thing is implement or passing the law. Another thing is the implementation. Ang dami pang stages ng UHC. We're not even halfway. And now we're seeing so much problems with PhilHealth. They won't last, diba? 3 to 5 years na lang daw sila yung pondo nila. So how are we able to actually deliver the full extent of the UHC? Mahaba pa. We have a long way to go.
So thanks so much. So it's really knowing, but I guess as you mentioned, it's knowing where to go and going there together. So Mayor D, Doc Dance, and Laurence, thank you so much for joining us today. It would be so much fun to have a much longer conversation with all of you. And we hope to have this same conversation with you in another time in the future. Of course, this is not the last PH3D online learning series. If you need more information about the upcoming PH3D online learning sessions, please visit our microsite at bit.ly/PH3D-OLS. We'll post that. We will post that on screen later on. So thank you once again to all of our speakers. We hope this has inspired all our participants to take on a more data-driven approach in public service. To provide a synthesis, and I don't envy her for this assignment, and to officially close today's event, I'd like to introduce the overall project coordinator of PH3D. She's a senior fellow of Action for Economic Reforms and a senior lecturer at the University of the Philippines School of Economics and Asian Center. She has had several years in Philippine government and also in the private sector, tackling various fields. Please join me in welcoming Vicky Kimo.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you, Ira.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. For the last 1.5 hours, we have listened to our accomplished speakers. We started late. We have listened to our accomplished speakers from the local government, academia, and civil society, shared their perspectives about how a data-driven participatory approach can help inform better policy choices and improve service delivery. Through the casual conversation that we had, we have found opportunities for data analysis from the inspiring stories on the ground. We in the audience also had an opportunity to engage with the speakers through our chat messages and Q&A portion. Now, let me help you recall some points drawn from our speakers. Mr. Wagner, our head of cooperation from the EU delegation in the Philippines, emphasized that data is expensive in terms of collection and security, so data has to be useful. He also mentioned the importance of collaboration from the different sectors in the community in order to make the use of data beneficial to all. Mayor Bernard D, on the other hand, shared with us how a poor and mainly agricultural city like theirs, Cauayan City, became a smarter city through innovations, and now data from these initiatives is helping them improve public services. By using the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as benchmark, they are informed through data on how they're going to reach their goal of improving their lives, of their citizens' lives. Dr. Tony Dunn shared with us his team's experience in working with the LGU at the municipal and provincial levels in developing an electronic health record system and how they digitize data in order to provide a platform for the local chief executive to make informed decisions. He said the process of pulling data and pushing for development does not have to be high tech. Data should be simplified, adapted to local needs, interoperable, and connected. He said health that the health information that works best for the people starts from the frontliners and on the ground. Professor Eric Legara, on the other hand, shared with us how the automatic contract tracing that she developed with her team, composed of government and the private sector, using data and algorithms to automatically notify close contacts via SMS to help in reducing the spread of COVID and slowly reopen the economy. She said data science is not just about data, but it is about insight, in particular, actionable insight or using data for action. During the casual conversation, Dr. Dance mentioned that we have technology and knowledge on hand, but what is needed is the political will. Professor Legara said that we need a local chief executive who is a champion, who has very good management skills. Mayor D said does not call himself a champion, but he said he's very passionate, and he stressed that the importance of collaboration among all sectors in the community is very important. As Dr. Go mentioned in his talk, we are in the midst of a data revolution, and that data has never been as important as it is now that we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. He knows that data poverty makes it hard to solve real poverty. We hope that through this PH3D online learning series, or OLS, we are able to not just help LGUs through this revolution, but present to them a new world of opportunity to deliver better public service through a data-driven participatory approach. As all our speakers have illustrated, from the humblest to the biggest, any LGU can do it by first recognizing that it must be done, looking into what they already have, and then collaborating to make it happen. So, on behalf of Action for Economic Reforms, I would like to express our appreciation to our accomplished speakers for taking time to share their knowledge and experience with us. Mr. Christopher Wagner of the EU Delegation to Philippines, Mayor Bernard Faustino D. of Cauayan City, Dr. Antonio Danz of the Philippine Primary Care Studies, Professor Erika Legara of the Asian Institute of Management, and Dr. Laurence Anthony Go of Action for Economic Reforms. Our deepest gratitude as well goes to all the participants who attended this first online learning series and make it such a successful event. We had representatives from our project sites and partner LGUs, SUCs, and academe from the municipalities of Arteche and Giwan in Eastern Samar, Pasig City in Metro Manila, and the province of Sorsogon in Bicol. We also had representatives from government. May I recognize ASEC Mila Cristobal from the Department of Agrarian Reform and other representatives from the government. I saw several from the Department of Transportation and others as well. And CSO, and I'd like also to acknowledge our CSO partners, LICAS, we see ICS and others, ELAC, no, and others, which I think I'd like to apologize if I don't get to mention all of your names here, all of your organizations' names. And not but not the least, special thanks to the EU delegate to EU for supporting this project and to our AER colleagues for ensuring the smooth running of this event. Before ending my closing remarks, may I also invite you to the next PH3D online learning sessions. We have one lined up on financial technology in November. We hope for your continuing participation and support in making our online learning series truly become a capacity development channel to help local government units with a collaboration of other sectors of the community, not only to respond to regulatory requirements, but more importantly, to respond to the needs of their constituents through a data-driven participatory approach. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Vicky. This is the first online learning session of the PH3D online learning series. And as I mentioned in the chat, in the name of a data-driven process, we'd like to ask for your help to make our sessions more effective. A quick survey will pop up right now on your screens. It's just 5 questions. Please make sure to scroll to the next question before pressing end poll. And once again, in the tradition of a data-led process, we'd like to ask you how we can improve the process better by answering this poll before you go. It's 5 questions. Please scroll down before you hit end poll to reach the other questions. Okay, while that's happening, may we invite our speakers once again to open their video cameras or the videos so that we can have a quick group photo. Thank you very much to all our speakers once again. Okay, and that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining the pilot session of the PH3D online learning series. We hope to see you at the next one. Please visit our microsite. The site is posted on your screen for details and to register for the next PH3D online learning session. Data-driven development in the Philippines, or the PH3D project, is a project of the Action for Economic Reforms and is co-funded by the European Union. Thank you and have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor D. Thank you, Doc Tony Dance. Sayang,
Pwede
thank
rin
you,
kami
Professor Legara
magpa-picture
Wilson.
with Doc
Thank you.
Tony tsaka
Yeah,
kay
picture
Mayor.
tayo. Yeah. Okay, everybody.
Thank you po.
Yes.
Yep.
Pa tayo. Who's taking
Sino
the photo?
magpipicture?
Yes.